Let's talk a little bit about this neurobiologically informed understanding of trauma. That will be our basis. Bessel van der Kolk, after his first series of brain scan studies of what happened in the brain when individuals remembered trauma, found this extraordinary result. He writes, under conditions of extreme stress, there is a failure of hippocampal memory processing, which results in an inability to integrate into a coherent narrative, leaving the sensory elements of the experience unintegrated and unattached. He found it wasn't that our clients had amnesia for the trauma. They hadn't formed a coherent narrative memory. They were left with the sensory elements. So what are sensory elements without words? They are technically implicit or nonverbal memory. Everything we experience, we remember implicitly. We don't actually encode everything as a narrative memory. We remember how things feel. We don't necessarily remember all the details. Traumatic experiences, as Bessel found, fail to be encoded as an autobiographical memory because the brain is prioritized to favor survival over remembering. Implicit memories, emotional memories, physical memories, sensory memories, favor survival because we act and react from that felt sense that it's not safe. Pearl and his colleagues did a beautiful piece of research comparing the effects of sad memories, of grief-related memories, and traumatic memories, and found they were dramatically different. Verbal recall, which is what we have always prioritized in trauma treatment, reactivates the implicit memory networks, but then the prefrontal cortex shuts down, making it hard to actually process or integrate them. Implicit memories most often are evoked by triggers, little benign triggers that happen in the course of daily life, and which survivors interpret as information about what's happening right here, right now. Recognizing traumatic implicit memories requires some help from the therapist. And so it behooves us to know how to recognize an implicit memory. Feeling flashbacks, feelings that are sudden, intrusive, overwhelming, are most often implicit memories, unless the situation is a tragic, overwhelming situation. The feelings of intense desperation or shame or despair or rage that trauma survivors feel are most likely feeling flashbacks. Feelings related to the chronic expectation of danger, right? Of course, trauma leaves behind an expectation of danger. How could it not? So if your client is struggling with mistrust, with fear, anxiety attacks, hypervigilance, or what I call post-traumatic paranoia, fears that something that's already happened will happen again. Most clients don't describe it as, I'm afraid of what already happened. They describe it as, I'm afraid somebody's out to get me. I feel like I'm being stalked. Reflecting their experience. When a child is singled out for abuse, of course that child feels stalked or what's the right word? Has this feeling of someone's out to get me. Quite rightly, body memories. We don't often think about the memories held in our bodies, but when your client is numb, when your client is tense, nauseous, shaky, or even dizzy. I've had a number of trauma clients who suffered through months of dizziness only to realize later that they had been going through a trauma memory of some kind, not necessarily directly related to the dizziness. All kinds of impulses can be memory. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of a client who suddenly says, I can't stay, I have to get out, and runs out of your office. That's feeling memory. Or the client who says, you're cold and uncaring. And that perception is usually a body memory of the experience of parents who were cold and uncaring, or who felt to the child cold and uncaring. Posture, a posture that's of defeat, a posture of ready for battle, those can all be memories. The tendency to attack the body can be memory. And all the vegetative symptoms of depression, all the vegetative symptoms of anxiety disorders, symptoms of OCD, addictive behavior, and borderline personality disorder symptoms, all can be reflective of implicit memories. So, as you can see, this is a very different way of thinking about our clients. We're not thinking diagnostically. We're thinking about this, what I call living legacy of trauma. Bruce Ecker writes, emotional memory converts the past into an expectation of the future and makes the worst experiences in our past persist as felt realities. Right? That is the legacy of trauma. Now, we also have another kind of memory that's very, very important to be aware of in trauma treatment. It's procedural memory. It's a subset of implicit memory, and it's our memory system for functional learning. Skills, habits, automatic behavior of all kinds, conditioned responses. Driving a car is probably the best example, because procedural learning allows us to get into the car, turn it on, put on the seatbelt, and drive without having to think, what do I do with this key? How do I turn it on? How do I back up? We just get in and we drive. If you play the piano or the violin, right? Playing the piano is procedural memory. That's why it requires practice. All sports involve procedural learning. Bicycle riding, swimming, dance, even shaking hands, social behavior is procedurally learned, right? We all learn whatever the social behavior customs of our culture are all procedurally learned in childhood. And we believe that the procedural memory system evolved because it was more efficient. Human beings could respond instinctively. Think of the cavemen. They could learn to identify edible foods. They could learn to hunt, and they didn't have to think, how do I do this every single time? So our clients come to us with procedural memory that really tells us how they adapted to their trauma. I believe we actually don't need to know what happened. We need to know how it affected them. So, social behavior, profoundly affected by trauma. Making eye contact. I just had a conversation with someone about this in the past week, who interpreted her client's inability to make eye contact as a statement about her attachment to the therapist. And I had to explain to her, eye contact is procedurally learned in the first year of life. Right? Little babies have a gaze-seeking instinct. Their eyes wander and searching, researchers tell us, for eyes. If that little baby sees safe, warm, loving eyes, they will start to focus on those eyes. But if a little baby sees scary eyes, the eyes of a mentally ill parent, the eyes of a substance abusing parent, what do little babies do when they see something alarming? They close their eyes or they turn their heads. So when your client is having difficulty making eye contact, think. That tells us a lot about their early attachment experience, even if they say, I had perfect parents. We learn in childhood to ask for help, and we learn to accept help if we feel safe. Secure attachment promoting parents say, use your words, honey, use your words. And slowly children learn to use words instead of gestures. They learn to accept help if the act of accepting help feels positive and safe. They learn to express their feelings in words if encouraged to do so. That doesn't happen in traumatic environments. It's not safe to ask for help. It's not safe to accept help. And expressing feelings in words is certainly not encouraged. We also can see manifestations of procedural learning in what I call clients' default settings. Their tendencies to always blame themselves, or to always go into shame, or to always go to anger, or dissociation, or just shut down. We see it in behavioral patterns, whether it's the tendency to act out, or the tendency to isolate, the tendency to seek help, the tendency to avoid help, the inability to say no, or the inability to say yes. How your client expresses emotion, or whether your client feels emotion, all is procedurally learned. Often what we interpret as avoidance of emotion is emotional disconnection, a very adaptive response in a traumatic environment. Some of our clients have procedurally learned to cathartically express emotion. Some have learned to just let those emotions take them away. Interpersonal patterns can reflect procedural memory, whether your client expects too much from others or too little, whether your client gets too close too quickly or remains distant, whether your client becomes a caretaker or a caretakee. And procedural learning also applies to the nervous system. The autonomic nervous system controls our emotions, our energy level, our impulses. So much of what pertains to psychotherapy is controlled by the autonomic nervous system.